All right, so this video is for lab, and this is going to be concerning muscles. So I thought I would just do a video tutorial of the muscles that we're testing on in the cadaver lab and on the models using this nifty little tool. And also, just so you know, I'm still getting used to this tool, so if the navigation is a little bit funky, that's just me sort of learning the ropes. So I apologize if it's distracting. I'm going to try to make it not be. So I wanted to start with the muscles of the legs. And let's see what tools are available to me. Mark up. Oh, I can mark up within the little anatomy app. That's cool. How do I get out of it though? Oh, like so. Okay, that makes sense. And then what's control menu? Let's see what this does. Lower limb. Oh, I think it just subtracts the bones. Okay. Let's put that away. Okay, so it looks like it just works like this. So let's start with some leg muscles. And I do want to show my systems though, because that is how I can add and subtract muscles for superficial versus deep. So let's just leave that up. Okay, so we have the muscles of the anterior thigh. I'm just going to use Epic Pen to mark up because that's easier. And so these, your quads, also called your quadriceps femoris. So quad meaning four, ceps means head, so four heads or four muscles, femoris meaning your upper thigh. These are your extensors of your knee joints. So if these get shorter, it's going to pull your knee joint into an extended or straight position. So we call these the extensors, and then your hamstrings on the back of your leg are your flexors. So quadriceps means four because there's four main ones. And then there's also some muscles medially that are adductors and other kinds of functions and motions. So let's just have a look at those. So right here, we have the rectus femoris. So remember, rectus means straight up and down fibers, which they took some liberties on here, but whatever, that's fine. So fiber direction is like that. So that is your main one. And then underneath it and around it, you can see the vastus muscles, which are a group. And so between the rectus femoris and the vastus muscles, that adds up to being four total. So that's where we get the quadriceps thingy. I can't erase this dot. Okay, there we go. Okay. So the fade function is nice because you can isolate it and sort of make the rectus femoris pop out. So let's move on. So I mentioned the vastus muscles. So this is the vastus medialis. And what you can see is it's right medial to the rectus femoris. So if you're trying to recognize it, the rectus femoris is really easy. It's a good landmark. So if you go medial to the rectus femoris, you end up on the vastus medialis. And then if you go lateral from the rectus femoris, you end up on the vastus lateralis. And then if I take the muscle layer down by a couple, so that's the vastus lateralis. Let's go back to the vastus medialis right here. And then between the two is the vastus intermedius, which didn't end up being on your list, but it is just important to note generally because it's part of the vastus group and it explains why it's called quadriceps. So that's kind of the deal. So that's where all those are. And then let's add some back. All right, so going laterally, I wish I could move this arm. wonder if I can. Well, I'll learn about that later. I don't want to waste your time doing it. So this, and more specifically, this part right here, the belly of the muscle, is the tensor fasciae latae. So the tensor of the fascia, which is this guy, the IT band, also called the iliotibial tract, that is going to be, oh my God, did I not? Yes, I did. Okay. So the iliotibial tract is going to be essentially this long thing right here. So if you've ever foam rolled your IT band, you know how painful it is. It is not fun, but it loosens up the IT band and the TFL, the tensor fasciae latae, to pull on your knee joint less, among other things. So if you're a runner, one thing that can happen is you get knee pain because your tensor fasciae latae sort of seizes up and generates too much tension, and it pulls your knee out of whack, and it can cause knee injuries to happen. So if you foam roll it, it relaxes that back out and affords the IT band more flexibility. So the IT band is also called the iliotibial tract, but we call it the band here because I don't want you to think that mistakenly it's a nervous structure. It's not. It's connective tissue, dense regular connective tissue specifically. So that is what the IT band means. Oops. Oh, that's right. I have to click eraser, otherwise it doesn't do that, and I just jiggle the little model around, which is crazy. Okay, so if we go, oh great, now it's, there we go. So if we go down, we can see laterally the IT band inserting on the tibia. So if this gets too tense, it's going to pull on the tibia, and that creates knee pain, as you can probably see just by looking. Okay, so let's go up a little bit, and we're going to look at the Sartorius. Here's the Sartorius on the other side. So I love this muscle because it is very elegant. It goes from the anterior superior iliac spine down and across your quadriceps femoris. So it's diagonal, and it goes inferiorly to also insert on the tibia. So this is essentially going to function to do a bunch of different things, but one of them is if it gets shorter, right, it's going to pull the tibia more immediately. So one of its functions is to help adduct. So adduction is moving a limb closer to the midline. So that's the Sartorius. I like to remember it by, and this is a dated reference, so if you are Gen Z or whatever and you don't get it, I apologize. It's a cultural cornerstone for millennials like myself, and even Generation X folks, but Notorious B.I.G., a rapper who is dead, had a very famous song in which there was a vocal hook performed by some ladies, and one of the parts of that vocal hook was them saying "Notorious," referencing Notorious B.I.G. So I like to just say Sartorius when I think about it, which is silly, but silliness helps the information stick. Okay, so if we go medially here, we can see the Gracilis, and for this one, I'm going to hide others. Nope, I don't want to hide that much. Let's fade others. There we go. So this is right next to the Sartorius, but instead of crossing over diagonally, it just goes straight down from the groin. And if we go up, we can see it attaching or originating on the pubis in the neighborhood of the pubic tubercle. And then if we go downward, we can see that it inserts additionally on the lateral aspect of the tibia. So this is another one that's going to function to adduct. So move the limb closer to the midline, move the leg closer to the midline, right? So that's what that looks like. And then here's the Sartorius. So you can see this one's diagonal, Gracilis is not. but inferiorly they run together and they go to roughly the same place. All right, so let's take some muscles away and we'll look at our adductors. Let's add the sum back. I'm going to add a few back just because you're going to be looking at them with all the muscles on, like so. So I'm going to show you them first that way, and then we'll look at the other ways. So pectineus is not on your list because I haven't done a deep enough dissection for that. But we do have the adductor longus here and here. And that's going to be right next to the gracilis. So remember, adductors move a limb closer to the midline. So you have 3 of these adductors. So there's adductor longus, adductor brevis, and adductor magnus. The ones that are on my lab students list are adductor longus and adductor magnus only. I will show you the others, but they're not going to be tested on. So longus, longus. So if you go to find the gracilis and go immediately medial, that's how you find the adductor longus. Or you can take the Vastus Medialis and follow it up, and you'll find it there as well. So let's just subtract a couple muscles. There we go. So we've got the adductor brevis, which is underneath the pectineus. So you'd have to subtract the pectineus. Let's see if we can do that. Yep, there we go. So it is under there, but we don't have a deep enough dissection on our cadavers for you to really see it. So let's add some muscles back. And then I'm going to turn this around actually. So you can see the adductor magnus. So if I poke on it, you can see it. It pokes out from under. It pokes out from underneath the adductor longus a lot more in our cadavers than it does in this picture. So it's there and there. And it's magnus because it's big and it basically is web-like and forms sort of a backdrop for the other 2 adductors. So if I turn this around, you can actually see that really well. So here and here, you can see it's a big web-like muscle that inserts on this long structure of the femur, which is called the linea aspera, by the way. The pulling of the adductor magnus on the femur actually creates that bony feature. So adductor magnus, adductor magnus. So you can see that this is going to forcibly, because of this fiber direction, these motor units, pull the top of the femur medially, and then also via this motor unit, pull the knee inward. So this is a very powerful adductor, and you can see it by looking at the extent of it and how web-like it is, and also the multiple fiber directions that it contains. All right, so that is your front of leg stuff. On our models in the lab, so not cadavers because we haven't flipped any to be prone, so we're only doing the hamstrings on the models. So let's have a look at what we've got here. So laterally is the biceps femoris. So remember, biceps means 2. Seps is 2, bi is 2, or seps is head, bi is 2. So this is the 2 heads femoris. The lateral most on the hamstrings and the one that's most visible is the long head. You guys don't have to differentiate between the heads. You just have to identify it as being the biceps femoris. And the trouble with it is it looks really similar to its neighbor, the semitendinosus. Especially if someone has an underdeveloped biceps femoris and maybe an overdeveloped semitendinosus, they can often be roughly the same size, which is not pictured here. But it's always the one that's most lateral. So just remember biceps femoris long head, lateral. Biceps femoris long, lateral. So lateral is your cue here. And then the semitendinosus is medial to the biceps femoris. And one of the reasons it's called the semitendinosus, which I don't understand why no one ever illustrates this. It's really frustrating to me because in real life, if you dissect a cadaver and you look at the semitendinosus, it has this tendinous inscription that runs roughly like that. So it's a little piece of tendon right in the middle of the muscle. And that's what gives it its name, semitendinosus, because of this inscription. So the fact that it's not illustrated on almost anything just really irks me. I don't understand why. Probably because the people who build these models are not anatomists, but they're being directed by them. They're artists. So semitendinosus here and here. And then if we take away a couple layers, how many layers do I have to take away to make this happen? Okay, that gets us to the semimembranosus, which is underneath. So underneath the semitendinosus is the semimembranosus. You just have to lift and look or see what's poking out from the side. Your models do have a removable piece. So again, this is frustrating because the semimembranosus is also named because the belly of the muscle, which is in red here, is actually not complete. It's covered over by the surface. So this tendon here, inferiorly, extends in a membranous sheet to cover over part of the belly of the muscle. So it's not running all the way through, it's just coming over the top in a thinner sheet of connective tissue, which goes up the muscle like so. And that's why it's called the semimembranosus, because it has a partial or semi-membrane over it. And the semitendinosus is called that because it has a partial tendon over it instead in the tendinous inscription. So I don't know why no one ever bothers to illustrate those things, because it's like basically the defining feature of the muscles and why they're named what they are. So semimembranosus, semimembranosus. It's just underneath, so let's add back underneath the semitendinosus. So we can see semitendinosus and then peeking out from under. And peeking out from under is the semimembranosus. All right, so that's the muscles of the thigh. Let's look at the anterior muscles, and I have to add some back. There we go. Okay, so here we have the anterior lower leg. So easy peasy ones first. It's always good to get the easy ones out of the way. We've got Tibialis Anterior. So if you look, you can see it attaches right to the anterior border of the tibia, nice and easy. So it originates next to the tibial tuberosity on the lateral aspect of the tibia, and it inserts all the way down here to MT1, metatarsal 1. So if you shorten this, it's going to pull MT1 upward, like so. So this tendon will generate tension and look more like this, and it's going to pull your foot into a flexed position. So also fun fact, this is the muscle that is mostly responsible for shin splints, if you've ever had those. So what that is when you are using your tibialis anterior very hard, like in distance running. I keep referencing running, but it is what it is. What happens is the muscle starts to pull away from the tibia. Nope, I don't want white. Pull away from the tibia along this border. And that causes tearing of the muscle and inflammation, which is painful. So that's what shin splints are, if you've ever wondered. So again, tibialis anterior, tibialis anterior. So let's twirl this model man. and look at what else is there. So Tibialis Anterior is superficial. The next one that's also superficial is the Extensor Digitorum Longus. There's also an Extensor Digitorum Brevis, but that's not on your list because it's deeper. So if we look, we can see that it originates, again, on the lateral aspect of the tibia, specifically the lateral epicondyle. And then we've got it connecting to the distal phalanges, except for the big toe, not the big toe. So this is going to extend your foot and help you to basically pull it into a more angular position, so not pointing your toe. So the foot is a little bit weird with flexion and extension because pointing your toe is technically considered to be flexing your foot or flexing your ankle because that position is not the normal position that it's in, and extending is considered to be pulling the foot into its normal position. So it's a little bit funky from that perspective, but you just have to kind of memorize it. All right, and then we can see also if we look closely, the Extensor Digitorum Longus is going to connect to all of the distal phalanges except for the big toe. The big toe has its own one, and that is the Extensor Hallucis Longus. So Hallucis refers to the hallux, which is your big toe. And that is going to extend and pull on the big toe specifically. So that muscle, along with another one called the Flexor Hallucis Longus, which is on the backside, are allowing you to have control of your big toe independently of the rest of your foot. It's also a set of muscles that are really important for balancing. So, oops. So if we go up, let's just look at its position relative to its neighbors. So Tibialis Anterior, underneath, but then popping out inferiorly and medial is the Extensor Hallucis Longus. And then next to that and more lateral is the Extensor Digitorum Longus. So let's go look at the Fibularis muscles, because we also have those visible. So if we go up here, we can see there's two muscles laterally. So the Fibularis longus is first. We'll get to the soleus in a minute. So longus refers to the long tendon. So you can see the tendinous portion is very long. And unlike on the zygote body thing that I lectured with in the lab, this one I can turn it underneath. So I can actually show you where the Fibularis longus goes. But before I do that, I want to point out that the lateral malleolus of the tibia basically anchors these. So they're going to pass behind the lateral malleolus and the little notch in it. And then that changes their direction, and then they're held in place there by a little fascial trochlea, which prevents them from popping off and like going like this, for example. So that's really interesting. But what's more interesting is that if we go all the way down, so let's just point it out again. We're going to do, there we go, Fibularis longus, long tendon, and you can see it disappears underneath the foot. So let's go look at where it goes. Oops. So if we look very closely, we can see it snakes underneath the arch of the foot. And regrettably, I'm going to hide others though, just for, well, I guess I'll fade others. It inserts on the base of MT1, metatarsal 1. So if this muscle flexes, it gets shorter and pulls on the base of the big toe, so it's going to pull the foot into a more pointed position. And then if we look underneath it, we will see its neighbor, the Fibularis Brevis, and the Fibularis Brevis crosses behind the lateral malleolus as well, but it just stops at the base of MT5. So Fibularis longus, MT1, Fibularis Brevis, MT5, and they're called the Fibularis because they rely on the lateral malleolus of the fibula to change their tendon direction, and that influences what they do to the foot. So again, if the brevis is contracted, it's going to make this tendon tensioned and it's going to pull this in this direction. So the fibularis muscles are responsible partially for pointing your foot. They're also important for standing and stabilization. So Fibularis Brevis, let's go up. Fibularis Longus, and let's add some muscles back. So Longus, let's keep the Brevis highlighted as we add things. So you can see both of them. So the Fibularis Brevis is going to poke out from underneath. If you go to the Extensor Digitorum Longus and go immediately lateral and deep, you'll find it. And it's also easy to find because the long tendon of the Fibularis Longus passes right over it. Okay, so here is the Soleus, which you can also see poking out on either side here. So that is the Achilles tendon, which is extremely important and very, very thick and collagenous, and this is because it's also elastic and stretchy. So when you jump, what you're doing is stretching the Achilles tendon and storing energy in it, and then its elastic recoil is what helps you get off the ground. So if you don't have an Achilles tendon, you can't jump or even walk really. So the soleus, and let's subtract a couple, there we go. Oh, I love the plantaris, but we don't have, it's on our list. I'll tell you about it though. So this is the soleus. It's a big broad muscle that's just underneath the gastrocnemius. It originates on the posterior aspect of the femur, right sort of, or excuse me, of the tibia, right behind the, and central in the middle of the two epicondyles at the top. And then it inserts on the Achilles tendon along with the gastrocnemius, and they both attach to the calcaneus, which you might remember from bones. So you can see that there. And so let's add back in, well, let me show you the plantaris first. The plantaris is an interesting muscle. So it has a really, really long tendon that goes between the gastrocnemius and the soleus. And kind of like the Fibularis Longus, if I can just get this oriented correctly, we can see that it goes to the plantar surface of the foot. So what it really does is it doesn't attach at the top, it goes down to the bottom of the calcaneus. So the plantar portion of the foot is the bottom of it, which you're seeing here. And so if this little plantaris flexes, what you're going to see is that it is going to pull on the calcaneus to pull it this way, which is going to cause the front of the foot to move down. So plantar flexion is what we call that. Pointing your toe is plantar flexions. The plantaris helps with plantar flexion. It's not the only muscle that does that, but it is a fun one because of its long tendon and its weird spot that it's in. Okay, so here we have the gastrocnemius. So there's a medial and a lateral head. You just have to know that it's the gastrocnemius. But the reason it's called the gastrocnemius is because it means the stomach of the leg. So gastro is stomach. And that's just because it has 1, 2 bellies and heads. But you just have to know that it's the gastrocnemius. So similar to the soleus, but in separate portions instead, this is going to originate on the posterior aspect of, let's fade the others. Oh, isolate is what I need. Okay, cool. Just learned that function. So the gastrocnemius is actually going to originate on the femur, on the epicondyles, and then it inserts on the calcaneal tendon and the dorsal or top of the calcaneus. And then if we go to the medial head, we can see the medial head does the same thing, but on the other side, so medially. All right, so that was muscles that you have to know of the leg for this term, so spring 2022. I may modify this video in the future to include more muscles based on how much we get done dissection-wise, but that's a really good start. And so I'm going to pause now and get this uploaded, and then I will return and do a video for the muscles of the arm. So as always, thank you for your attention, and I will see you in the next episode.